Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. Ensconced in our new NYC locale. It is a beautiful, foggy, rainy day, which I find charming as hell after 4.5 years in the unyielding heat of Los Angeles. And today I'm going to be bringing you one of my all-time favorite bands. I say that a lot, but today it's actually true. They're a top 5 band for me. The Smiths. I love the Smiths. They are the band that got me through high school. And for that, I am eternally grateful. It's hard to believe that they broke up 35 years ago. Don't do the math. It'll make you feel as old as I do. In any case, I'm going to be ranking my favorite Smiths albums in order, from my favorite to my least favorite. Exactly the opposite of how YouTube wants me to do this. But I figure you people are busy, I'm going to cut to the chase. So please join me for my favorite Smiths albums. Gravediggers of the world, unite. You know, because Pop Culture Graveyard? No, forget it, if I have to explain it. Before we get rolling, I just want to give a shout out to my latest patron. Thank you, Martin. You are my man down under, and I greatly appreciate all of your musical knowledge, Mr. Cope. If you're enjoying the content I'm bringing you and would like to support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. If you've watched my Top 100 Albums episode, then my favorite Smiths album is not a secret. Meat is Murder. This is a top 5 album for me, all time. I absolutely adore the Headmaster Ritual, Rush Home Ruffians, Nowhere Fast, and Well I Wonder. 4 of my all-time favorite Smiths songs on one album. Added to that, it's got Barbarism Begins at Home, which is the funkiest thing any British band did in the 80s. Come at me, bro. Barbarism Begins at Home showcases, perhaps better than any other Smiths track, the genius of Johnny Marr. You don't need vocals on that track. In fact, it's hard to lay vocals on that track. I don't know how Morrissey did it. Much like James Williamson in Raw Power, Johnny uses up an awful lot of that sonic space that Morrissey even found places for his vocals, let alone such hook-laden vocals, is a testament to his greatness at the time. When the vocals finally drop out, you're left with what seems like 45 minutes of non-stop dance music, give or take 43.5 minutes. Something that doesn't jump out at you immediately when you listen to this album is the outstanding bass playing of Andy Rourke. Listen to the balls-to-the-wall attack of Nowhere Fast and the understated rhythmic brilliance of Well I Wonder to get a really good sense of the yin-yang of Andy's bass approach on this album. The Headmaster Ritual perfectly captures the belligerent ghouls who run Manchester schools, yet you're still going to want to sing along with it. Rush Home Ruffians is perhaps the most visceral track on the album. You are at the fair with snapshots of violence and sex. I Want the One I Can't Have, that joke isn't funny anymore. I was in Dublin, Ireland in 1985, and every record store, every Golden Discs and every Dolphin Discs was plastered with the single for That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. This is the single that I bought at Golden Discs back in 1985. And in my opinion, it is a far greater Smiths song than it ever gets credit for. The final refrain, I've seen this happen in other people's lives, now it's happening in mine. I'll put that up with any of the best lines that Morrissey has ever written. Anyway, it's a great single, and an odd choice for a single. The B-side, by the way, is a live version of Meat is Murder, which I think smokes the original that's on here. But that's neither here nor there. This is my favorite Smiths album. You may notice it has the hype sticker on the shrink wrap that's still on this one. This is the US release, and it features How Soon Is Now, which of course is probably the best known Smiths song of all time. The British release on Rough Trade Records does not feature How Soon Is Now, which was a single release in the UK. I don't have to talk about How Soon Is Now. It is a fantastic song, and it's just one more thing to sweeten the US album. Incidentally, you'll be happy to know that whether you get the US album or the British Rough Trade original, they both sound phenomenal. So you really can't go wrong with either. My second favorite Smiths album, The Queen Is Dead. This album features phenomenal songs such as Big Mouth Strikes Again, Cemetery Gates, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side, but my favorite track on this album may just be the title track, The Queen Is Dead. It starts out with an audio snatch of a movie where a character is singing "Take Me Back to Dear Old Blighty." The film audio fades out. There's almost like a clarion call that begins tribal drumming that increase in intensity until all of the instruments come in with an almost flanging effect and just overpower your eardrums. It is one hell of an A-side track 1, and it really kicks off this album with style, given their new heavy approach. The side 2 track, "There Is a Light That Never Goes Out," is such a beautiful song, both musically and lyrically, that speaks to heartbreak, that speaks to depression. It's one of the most uplifting, sad songs I've ever heard in my life, and I absolutely love it. And the subject matter of the song is so downbeat that it has to be sandwiched in between two almost comical songs, "Vicar in a Tutu" and "Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others." I think that placement does the song a disservice, but I kind of understand the thought process. Big Mouth Strikes Again is probably the song I'd play for anyone who was curious about this album, as it is the easiest on the ears and the most radio-friendly. The dourness of "I Know It's Over" and "Never Had No One Ever" is totally undone by "Cemetery Gates," which as a high school kid I could not tell you how much I loved that it name-checked Oscar Wilde, who I was already into as an avid reader. That song and this entire album made literacy okay in rock. And frankly, Mr. Shankly is just plain fun. Second favorite Smiths album. Incidentally, this is the Rough Trade original, and it sounds just peachy. Up next, Strange Ways Here We Come, my third favorite Smiths album. This is the UK release on Rough Trade. You can tell because it has the embossed letters up at the top, in addition to the label, of course. The big story on this album, as far as my rankings, is that it almost overtook The Queen Is Dead. And I think a few more years from now, this will be my second favorite Smiths album. It is aging like fine wine. When the sort of distorted, haunted piano kicks off the album with a rush and a push and "The Land Is Ours," I'm all in. The fact that the lyrics are really interesting and are layered over one of Johnny's most jaunty tracks, forget about it. I started something I couldn't finish. Death of a Disco Dancer. This is advanced stuff. This is the band pushing beyond the boundaries of its drums, guitar, and bass sound. They're experimenting in really, really interesting ways. "Girlfriend in a Coma" is one of my favorite Smiths tracks ever. They even made a video for it. How cool is that? And it's a weird one, with Morrissey's disembodied head superimposed over the little playlet. But it's fun. "Stop Me If You Think That You've Heard This One Before" is an undeniable track. I defy you not to like that track. My favorite track on this whole album, perhaps, is "Unhappy Birthday." It's super stripped down. The bulk of the track, you're just hearing mainly guitar and vocals. But when all of the instruments kick in, it rocks out just as hard as any other. "Paint a Vulgar Picture" is such a shrewd takedown of the record industry, and it is just as valid today as it ever was. Maybe more so. I heard Morrissey perform that on the Maladjusted tour in Central Park, and it was one of the first times I ever heard him perform a Smiths song in one of his sets. And I was blown away because I never thought he'd go near any Smiths material. And, you know, in the years subsequent, he practically puts on a Smiths tribute show at times. But at the time, it was very rare, and I was so excited. And it reawakened my love for that song. The album ends on the downbeat "I Won't Share You," but that does not dampen the effect of this album as a whole. This is a killer album, and my third favorite Smiths album. That leaves us the Smiths' debut. I am not alone in putting this at the bottom of the heap for Smiths' studio albums. The band themselves were not happy with the job that the initial producer, Troy Tate, did with this album, so they called in John Porter, and he took over and gave them an album that they were more happy with. I don't think the band was ever head over heels about this album. That said, this album was so fucking important when it came out. It just cut through all of the makeup and hair that was overtaking the 80s. But this was a stark breath of fresh air at a time when it was needed, and it pointed the way for an awful lot of bands to follow. You've Got Everything Now, Miserable Lie, Pretty Girls Make Graves. This was almost like Jangle Pop by R.E.M. meets British kitchen sink dramas. These are tales of everyday lives of quiet desperation, with enough drama to fill a Sam Shepard play, and still In songs like This Charming Man and Hand in Glove and What Difference Does It Make, the band manages to rock out and connect with music lovers in a very conventional way. What Difference Does It Make is the first Smiths song that I ever heard. It was on a compilation that my aunt had in Ireland, and I could not believe my ears. I played the track over and over and over, and it stuck out like a sore thumb on this compilation with other 80s bands. It opens with a kind of subdued guitar playing this circular pattern, and then it explodes with the rhythm section coming in, and it was everything I wanted in music at the time. And in these subsequent listenings over the years, and I play it most times I DJ, it hasn't lost any of its impact with me. It is a badass track. What Difference Does It Make is my favorite track on this album. And that's saying something, given all the heavy hitters on this album. Miserable Lie is such a fun song. And it's got a gimmick of Morrissey going into his upper register and singing as high-pitched as he ever has. And either the gimmick works for you or it doesn't work for you. It works for me, and it is a killer song. And trust me, Morrissey is the perfect man to write a takedown song about sex. This is a phenomenal album, and the fact that it's my least favorite Smiths album speaks more about all of the albums that came after it. Now you may be surprised. Where are all the other Smiths albums? Well, guess what? They only did 4 studio albums, and that's what I just gave you. For my patrons, I will break down all of the compilations as well as the live album and where they stand in my rankings. But for the rest of you, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff. For the rest of this week's episode, please visit patreon.com/popculturegraveyard.